Hello, I'm Rev Kymmi, and I'm also a trial paralegal.
And I'm Dr. G, a forensic victimologist, and I am also a reverend. Today is July 24th, 2022, and this is Season 1, Episode 3, The Tennessee Bombing and Jennifer Michelle Lorber, Behind the Scenes. So, Kymmi, what stories are you going to share with us today?
Well, I have two stories about my Christian ministry gift of prophecy. The first one is about a horrific, violent event. The Christmas Day bombing in Nashville, Tennessee. Do you guys remember that? Do you remember that, Dr. G? And the second one is about a very sad missing person case, Jennifer Michelle Lorber in Malibu, California. I just want to say, guys, that this podcast is not about law enforcement or any individual mentioned. It actually is not even about me. It is about God.
And we are not here to judge others who feel that their world and their life have turned against them. We are not shaming victims of suicide. This podcast is about hope for the future, preservation of the physical body and mind, and salvation of the soul. This podcast is about restoration of relationships with the self, with others, and with God. Isaiah 31:10 tells us, "Don't be afraid, for I am with you. Don't be discouraged, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you." That's the New Living Translation. Jeremiah 29:11 tells us, "For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." Today, our stories include a very important topic, one that unfortunately touches way too many lives in America today. That topic is suicide. According to a recent CDC National Vital Statistics Report, number 16, published in November 2021, America recorded 47,511 suicides in 2019, and another 45,855 in 2020. My goodness, that's over 90,000 suicides in 2 years.
Yeah, that's a very terrible thing. You know, with my 20-year ministry, it involved hospitals, ER, ICU, convalescent, hospice, sometimes mental wards. But within those 20 years, I was ministering to about 100 people a week, and some people, nurses, came to me as well to minister to them. I ran into, I'll just mention one case, and of course not mentioning names, but one patient, she came into the convalescent hospital. She had an attempted suicide, and she had been fighting with her boyfriend. He broke up with her, and she was devastated. He left, she was living on her own. She locked her doors. She took pills, and the boyfriend came back later, knocking, trying to get in. He eventually broke in, found her unconscious. She had had a stroke from pills that she took, and later on had to go into a convalescent hospital. She was left in worse situation than the start. And if only she had waited some, her boyfriend returned and was trying to make up with her. So it's a tragedy. I have seen several cases through 20 years of hospital ministry where people have an attempted suicide and they're left worse than they ever started. So their situation became even worse for themselves.
Yeah, we're confronted with problems, and unfortunately some people resort to that mentality, that thought that this will solve their problems. And
well, they probably don't know where to go, and we're going to talk about those things.
Yeah. Okay. This first story Incredible. I wanted to start by saying that I was absolutely in awe of God by both of these stories because I was present to witness either or both their revealing and or their affirmation. And I'll disclose my awareness and involvement as we go along. Okay, just so our listeners get the sequence of events in order, because I didn't understand at first this first story as it was unfolding, and it really took me by surprise. Did this story start with a prophetic dream during the night, during your sleep? How'd it go down? I see that your first email message regarding this story was to yourself at 4:21 a.m. on Thursday, November 5th, 2020. Wow, you're an early riser. Not me. Tell us about how did this go down?
Well, you're right. I am. I do rise early. I do. I was up early. Could be 3:30 in the morning, 4 a.m. I was just living my normal life. You know, you're having coffee, you're watching TV, the news, or what have you. And all of a sudden, God showed me a prophetic vision. I saw a regular two-way street with buildings on each side. It appeared to be a small town in comparison to, let's say, downtown Los Angeles, because the buildings were much smaller. I knew it was a town within the United States. I knew there was a man who planned to detonate a homemade bomb. God did not show me his motorhome or which specific town. I was given specific prophetic revelation warning by God that one should stay out of the surrounding buildings and out of the streets that are near those buildings, that it would be safe to stay down the street, in the street, away from those buildings. Then the prophetic vision and the information left as quickly as it came on me.
Wow. So you were wide awake when this happened.
Yeah.
Incredible. Okay. I recall clear as anything you calling me that morning. I could hear the distress in your voice. You shared that vision with me that God had shared with you. And having been in the military and the Army for 16 years, and having been in Bosnia-Herzegovina after the war, I know what urbanized areas look like after they've been shelled and attacked. And what you described to me sounded like a combat zone. But here in the United States, I was like, wow. So we talked for a little while, and like I said, I could really hear the distress in your voice, and we discussed courses of action. You're like, what should you do? And at the end, we agreed that somebody needed to be warned, but it's like, where do you start? You know, who's going to believe you, and where do you go? So what did you do next?
Honestly, I was praying for quite a while. And then it realized me I should just do some kind of a notation to myself, which is the best way, is to email yourself, right? So you get a date and time stamp as evidence as to what God showed me. So I emailed myself and I wrote, quote, just shown vision of bombing, big black smoke all around, not sure where it is in America, horrible, end quote. Then I was just beside myself with my nerves over what I was just shown and the knowledge behind it. And being that I've been involved with missing person cases with law enforcement here and there, not that I'm employed by any law enforcement agency, I am not, but I have a reference. And so I thought to email my reference the information because, you know, just like when we're at work or we live with people, people grow on us. They grow on me. And I start to really care about people and really like them. And so, I mean, who else do I have to warn about this except for my law enforcement reference? And so I emailed him at 4:29 a.m. So just 8 minutes later, I emailed him to warn him. Though I don't know exactly where in America, but I had to relieve my conscience, the guilt if I didn't give them warning and something happened, I would feel really, really horrible. So I did my best to warn. Here's what I wrote, my law enforcement reference in an email. Not sure which city in America, but just saw a bomb go off in a public place in or near a building. Tell all your cops and other employees to stay in the middle of the street. We'll be safer there. Do not stay or stand near buildings. I can't help but to warn you, though I honestly do not know which city in America. Think a homemade bomb. Pretty big explosion, though. Horrible chaos is coming down the pike. I have been up all night praying. Stay safe, Rev Kymmi.
Well, this prophetic word came to pass on Thursday, November 5th, 2022.
You mean 2020?
2020, yes. That's when you got it. An affirmation came 50 days later on Friday, December 25th, Christmas morning, 2020. It was all over the national news. I couldn't believe my eyes. Pictures and videos of massive, massive destruction and chaos. People running around not knowing what to do, just as God had revealed to you. Thankfully, no one else died except the bomber. And this was Christmas time, so it took a while for investigators to get geared up and for people to do things. And the FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit, the profilers, went in there and did their job, state, federal, everybody. And they suggested that the bomber, in their report, actually took precautionary measures to reduce the casualties. He chose Christmas morning at this time because people wouldn't be out shopping yet. And it seems like he actually fired several shots into the air to get someone's attention so they would call the police and get him down there. He had a recorded message that played over a speaker that told people that the bomb was going to go off in 15 minutes and they needed to clear the area. So it seems like he really went out of his way to make sure that he was the only one that was going to get killed in this process. It was a clear suicide. So Christmas morning at approximately 6:30 a.m. Central Time, because this was in Nashville, Tennessee, the bomb exploded in his parked RV, a huge bomb. He was near an AT&T store at 166 2nd Avenue North between Church Street and Commerce Street. His name was Anthony Quinn Warner. He was 63 years old, from Antioch, Tennessee, and he acted alone. They did not classify it as terrorism, as a terrorist act. And it was just as God had revealed to you. It was a vehicle-borne, homemade, improvised explosive device, an IED. And again, they determined it was suicide, and they went in. He said there was the detonation of the improvised explosive device was an intentional act in an effort to end his own life, driven in part by a totality of life stressors, including paranoia, long-held individualized beliefs adopted from eccentric conspiracy theories, and the loss of stabilizing anchors and deteriorating interpersonal relationships. Just as we know about many cases of suicide, a life in anomie, one that is falling apart.
Yes, I saw the photos of the aftermath, and they were exactly as God had shown me. In fact, the photos were obviously taken from down the street, and there wasn't any debris or things like that, and it was exactly what God had shown me, that would be the safe spot. But if you're in the street near the buildings or in the buildings, it wouldn't be safe. And if you guys go look at those photos or even videos of the bomb going off, you would see that that is the only place that you're safe. So that was really nice of God to give that information.
Yeah, and we did find when we were querying this several months later a video of the explosion that was picked up on a security camera, and oh my goodness, you could see this mushroom cloud rise up above the buildings. I found an article that talked about a guy who went out every morning for a walk, 300 and some pounds, 6'6". He was over a block away, and it knocked him right off his feet when it went off. But as I said, only person that died was the bomber. And there were 8 people injured, but no one else was killed, thank God.
To be honest with you, today I am traumatized still from this event. Because, when I see this, and with all the experience that I have with God showing me visions, they come to pass. And I'm very traumatized, to be honest with you, with regards to recalling the event of what God warned me, the prophetic message, the vision. And it makes me want to just curl up in a ball on the floor while holding my head and screaming. Still today, if I think about this event, because it's just so traumatizing to know that that's going to occur. And I relive the warning prophetic vision and recalling what occurred over and over since that God gave me the warning. It was very scary for me, and it still is when I think about it.
Okay. Well, what an incredible gift. There certainly seems like a lot of responsibility and, goodness, a lot of potential for stress involved in the gift of prophecy.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay, well, probably, some of the stuff you see, not only with this, but with some of the other cases we've talked about, that's got to be certainly a form of PTSD that could develop there.
If you think about it, like when police officers are out and they are involved in a police shooting or whatever, they have debriefing, they have counseling, they have all this. But on some cases, I am involved in big situations on cases like this behind the scenes, or like on the Casey White and Vicky White case. People can go to episode 2 to hear that. I'm in prayer a lot and trying to get, in hopes that there's resolution to the situation and of course peace, and that nobody gets injured. But it is a burden, though I do like helping, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I hope, for our listeners, you can see here that all of these podcasts, we're not going to simply cover missing persons cases repeatedly, case after case after case. There are quite a few of those that you, Kymmi, have worked on, but like this case here that we just talked about, the Tennessee bombing, the Christmas Day bombing in Nashville, that was a very specific event. And I know that there are other cases that we can talk about down the road that deal with prophetic words to individuals that we'll talk about at one point, and other specific events that God disclosed to you. But moving on from this horrific event, what story are you going to share with us next?
I'll share one of the most recent successful cases of God revealing information through the prophetic word and it coming to pass. That's on the missing person case of Jennifer Michelle Lorber. She was from Colorado, and she went missing in May 2019 while on vacation in Malibu, California.
Okay, Jennifer Michelle Lorber. Tell us about it.
Well, I've done this over and over. Or I should say God has done this over and over. I'm just his vessel. Kristen Smart's case was not the first, so please go to episode 1 to hear about her case. But like I'm saying, the most recent one is Jennifer Michelle Lorber in Malibu 2019. This case, just like Kristen Smart's, I also worked it remotely, which I guess psychics refer to remote viewing, and I'll just adopt that term. I was in Southern California. She went missing in Malibu, and I was in Santa Clarita, California, near Magic Mountain. I did not go to Malibu. I was at Starbucks in Santa Clarita, California, and God gave me the information of her whereabouts. I was like I said, at Starbucks. My hand is with a coffee. I'm walking. I'm multitasking, as we all do, looking at my cell phone, and I see my email. I get a Nixle, Nixle, public notification from Los Angeles Sheriff's Department or whomever else. I don't know if anybody else puts out messages on that. But I saw a missing person of Jennifer Michelle Lorber in Malibu, and sometimes when I look at photos, I instantly, with my prophetic gifts, I know the information, exactly where they are, what happened to them, etc. So, God did give me info of her whereabouts and what had happened to her. So I called in the details of what happened and her whereabouts to the assigned detective. I then followed up with the same information to another detective via text that I was helping at the same law enforcement agency. They found her the next morning in the ocean, dead by suicide, near the cliffs, exactly where God had told me. And Los Angeles Sheriff's Department internal investigation later reported that, just to paraphrase it, that I had called it, that I had it in writing, and yep, she reported it the day before by text.
Okay, that's a pretty good summary of what happened. But I think our listeners are really finding this quite interesting, because this is a story that I was not just involved over the phone talking to you about, but I got to participate in some of the events later on. But can you tell us a little more detail about how this all transpired? You're talking about you're walking with a coffee in your hand and your phone, and you get this Nixle alert, and it was on Wednesday, May 29th, 2019. What happened?
Sure, yeah, I'm walking with my, like I said, Starbucks, with my cafe mocha and with my phone in hand, and I'm walking and I'm multitasking, reading my email. On Wednesday, May 29th, 2019, I received a Nixle alert to my personal email from Los Angeles Sheriff's Department as a plea for the public's help in locating a risk missing person, Jennifer Michelle Lorber, and further stating that anyone with information about the incident, her whereabouts, is encouraged to contact the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Missing Persons Unit. So listeners can all of the evidence, they can all find the evidence of this case pinned to my Facebook on my docuseries. And my Facebook is found as Kymmi, Kymmi, Bloomberg, BLOOMBERG. You go into Jennifer Michelle Lorber's video. You guys want to see these original emails or text messages, you can look in the comments to her video and you will see them.
Yeah, and the Tennessee bombing video was also there. That's number 9. And Jennifer's case is video interview number 3 at those
and
pin
you can
posts.
see the evidence on both cases there.
Yeah, all the documents, the emails, the text messages, everything. Yep. Then you can make your own judgments.
Yeah, so on May 29, 2019, at about 10 a.m., as a result of receiving the Nixle alert, I contacted a specific Los Angeles Sheriff's Department detective by telephone call. I do have call log evidence and stuff like that. I further documented that phone call in a 10:30 a.m. text message to a different Los Angeles Sheriff's Department detective in the same unit. I shared with this detective the fact that I had called the other detective as well as the tip information that I had shared. My cell phone still contains these original text messages. I told the detective that Jennifer's body would be found eventually coming back in by the tide. I recovered by the Pacific Ocean just off Paradise Cove in the water near the cliffs. I suggested that she may have jumped off the cliffs into the ocean. Thus, the matter of death would be suicide. The detective told me they planned to search the ocean tomorrow. So God's timing was perfect. So they were planning to search, and I knew where her body was. So it was a good coordination, collaboration. So the duration of that call was about 11 minutes and 15 seconds. And during said call, I informed the detective that I know of the whereabouts of the case he is assigned to, the missing person case of Jennifer Michelle Lorber. And he continued to listen as I further explained that I have a history of working alongside, not as a volunteer, not as an employee, but as a separate person, a reverend, an ordained Christian minister, in collaboration with Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Missing Person Homicide Unit on other cases, other active cases with a few other detectives. Of course, I told that detective those detectives' names, but they are confidential. I'm not going to mention that here.
Yeah.
So I further explained that I have utilized my prophetic gifts to locate missing persons since 1997 to present, and I have had much success working with police and or the family of missing persons nationwide.
Now, that 1997 case, that was when you first got involved with that Kristen Smart case, right?
Yeah, that's when her initial detective sought me out for my gifts to help them on Kristen Smart's case. And people can go to episode 1 to hear about her case.
Okay.
So the affirmation of my prophetic word came at 11:28 a.m. the very next morning, Thursday, May 30th, 2019, when Los Angeles Sheriff's Department announced that they had recovered Jennifer Michelle Lorber's body 225 feet off the shoreline at Paradise Cove. Exactly where I had told the detective that she was. His final affirmation came via the news online a day or so later, when I learned that Los Angeles Sheriff's Department had in fact recovered Jennifer's body. I'm sorry. In the ocean just off the cliffs on the coast of Paradise Cove. She was found exactly where God had said.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I get very emotional. I think it's obvious why I do what I do. Because I care about people, whether they're alive or dead. They still need help.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, this was one of the first cases that we kind of worked together on. At least I was brought in as a consultant because of my background. I remember you calling me and asking me about finding and recovering bodies from the ocean. And I told you at that time that I was more familiar with lakes and inland rivers.
I don't think people know about the book you've authored and the TV series. Why don't you mention that for a second?
Yeah, I wrote a book with Kevin Gannon, a retired New York detective sergeant, and it's called Case Studies in Drowning Forensics.
Yeah, he's the most decorated New York homicide detective, right?
Yeah. He's got like 2 medals of valor, and that's like getting a Medal of Honor, risking his life. And Kevin and I wrote those books, and I'm also quite familiar with this body of water, so to speak, because the year I spent in Monterey at the Defense Language Institute learning Czech for the Army, I also got my advanced open water diver certification, NAUI certification, out there in Monterey Bay and Monastery Beach and Lover's Cove and all those different places, and doing deep dives and underwater navigation and all that kind of stuff. So I'm familiar with currents. And I'm also very familiar with drowning. In the 3rd grade, I was pulled out of a swimming pool. at a hotel during a birthday party. So you called
Did
me.
you
and
die?
Well, I remember seeing light dancing on the surface of the water above me, and then the next thing I know, I woke up on the edge of the pool.
So do you know if you technically died?
I don't know if it was,
Oh, so there's no medical doctor there to even tell you that, right?
No, it was just
It's assumption.
the birthday boy's mother that revived me.
Did she do CPR on you?
Yeah, and I do recall that drowning was very peaceful. It didn't hurt. In fact, what hurt was breathing fresh air again. But I told you, I promised you that I would research this matter because I wanted to find out more about bodies in salt water, in particular the ocean. So after getting back to you, I knew that human bodies, because of my diving experience, are positively buoyant in salt water. You go to like the Dead Sea and stuff, and it's almost impossible to sink. And I remember when I was scuba diving, I had to wear 21 pounds of lead, along with, the wetsuit and everything else, and the buoyancy compensator, in order to be negative buoyant, so I would actually sink in the Pacific Ocean. Typically, if a body goes down in the ocean, this is what I found, then it stays down. And that's because of the natural buoyancy. You would float. So if you die, you float. And if somebody finds you, and eventually your body decomposes enough, or animals get to you, and but in any kind of water, freshwater, salt water, or even a swimming pool, a decomposing body bloats with gases. As you decompose, you create gases, and then that causes you to float back to the surface.
Now, if people want to learn more about this, they can buy your book. Don't you discuss these kinds of things in your book?
Yep. Case studies and drowning forensics. And you can get it on Amazon, a bunch of different places, fairly inexpensive. It is a textbook. It's high-quality paper. A lot of, like 300 and some graphics that I created for it. But I know from diving out here that the water here doesn't get very warm. And this contributes to the problem. Up in Monterey, we wore 3/8-inch neoprene suits just to stay warm. And if you do, and you go much below 45 feet, like a deep dive, 120 feet, and it was bitterly cold down there. If you quit moving, you got cold immediately. This cold water will retard the decomposition and the bloating process. So, at the time that Jennifer went missing, the Nixle went out on May 29th, but here's the timeline. Thursday, May 23rd, 2019, around midnight, is when Jennifer made last contact with her family, according to law enforcement. And her cell phone was active that next morning, Friday morning, between 12:30 a.m. and 1:40. But her body wasn't recovered for 6 days later. Now, this is important. Keep in mind what I said about temperature and decomposition and everything else. This led to the speculation in online blogs and in the media that Jennifer did not commit suicide, rather that she had been murdered. Now, I'm not going to get into all the different conspiracy theories around her alleged murder, but is centered on statements by local residents familiar with the ocean tides and currents. They said that she could not have remained out there for that long without detection, 225 feet from the cliff. However...
Yeah, but the cliff is isolated. Nobody can walk over there.
Exactly. And they said she couldn't have been there the whole time. Well,
she obviously
like I said,
was.
I'm not going to go into the details, but I have written the book on drowning forensics, and all I can say is, in order to make a definitive conclusion or assessment, I would have to see the recovery and the autopsy photos, look at the condition of her body relative to putrefaction, autolysis, and anthropophagy. That's animal predation on the body. You're out there for 6 days in the ocean. And then I can make that estimate. But it is irrelevant, because with the temperature, she would have sank. In my opinion, she would have stayed out there. And to me, it was an absolute miracle that her body was recovered at all from the Pacific Ocean. More importantly, And this is the important part. This is the real miracle in this. Not all this speculation about her being murdered and all that. What is important is she was found. Her body was recovered exactly where God had told you it would be found and when. You said, go out there. She's in front of the cliffs, and go out there the next day. And that's exactly what they did, and that's where they found her. And if you look at the hotel she was staying in, and over to Point Doom where she was recovered, what a name, huh? Is 9.2 miles by road and 5 miles by water. That is a lot of ground and a lot of water to look for a tiny little human body. Could they have overlooked her? Sure. But, like I said, the miracle of all this is she was found exactly at the location and the time that God told you to tell the police to go look for her.
Yeah,
that's the miracle.
He kept showing me that she's dead in the water by suicide and by the cliffs. He kept showing me the cliffs. So I really emphasized that to the detective. And, you know, I really want to give kudos to, you know, the detective for listening. And for Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, I think that they're honestly amazing. And what they did to recover Jennifer is just amazing. You know, it's a collaboration, really.
Yeah. Amen. And
they did a great job.
God used you as his instrument to deliver that information to authorities, and he used those detectives and their divers.
They had a helicopter.
As the instrument to
helicopter and boats.
Recover Jennifer and return her to her family.
Yeah.
What else? Now, this is where the story moves on, and this is actually pretty much where I came into play physically. I came out here to visit. January. Yep.
Yeah, so you mean about when we went out there to finally take the time to go and follow up to find out exactly where they found her?
Yeah.
Because if you look online, you know, it didn't specifically say she was found by the cliffs. Being that I'm a trial paralegal, and if I really, because I dig for the truth, I don't want to just hear what I want to hear. So we finally had time. I think a year had passed.
Just about.
Yeah. And so I was working another case, the Weaver case, nearby, a Weaver missing person. And so we were kind of nearby there. So I'm like, let's swing by Paradise Cove and try to investigate exactly where she was found, you know, for affirmations and to know. So I met up with the Paradise Cove cafe manager, and I told her that I had worked the case, I had called it in, and I wanted to know exactly where the police had found her body. And I didn't lead the witness, right? You're not going to give her any information about the cliffs, because then she's just going to tell me what I want to hear, right? So I want the truth, and so I didn't ever mention the cliffs or the water or anything. Where exactly did they find her, Jennifer? And she took us outside, and she pointed at, she said, the cliffs. She said, right over there by the cliffs. That's where they found her. And so that was an affirmation for sure.
Yeah. And she also told us some information that we had not found in the newspaper, and of course we hadn't gotten any of this information from the law enforcement. But she also told us that she was talking about the pier over there, that they had found her purse and keys and pills and some other stuff over there, and they searched that area frantically. And I remember her talking about how just the day before, in fact, the day that God was revealing this information to you, they had been out there and they'd searched up and down that whole waterfront and out in the water and just going crazy, you know, looking for a body floating on the surface. Because, like I said, bodies float in the Pacific Ocean. They don't go under, so.
Oh, you know, another thing she said to us, too, was which is, I put in writing, remember, about the cliffs, and she may have used the cliffs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this cafe manager mentioned to us that they had her on video footage at the cafe, that she was walking away from the water towards land, inland.
Mm-hmm.
And as we looked from the parking lot at the cafe, Paradise Cove Cafe, we can see, how do you get up on the cliffs? Well, yeah, you would go inland, you would go up around into this mobile home park, and you're able to get access to the cliffs. So we're thinking, that's an affirmation. That's most likely what she did, because she was walking away, the cafe manager said, away from the water, inland.
Yeah.
So it's very sad, that's for sure. So anyway, the LA Sheriff's Department was stumped for a time. That is why they put out a cry for the public's help, whereby I received a next level missing person notification of Jennifer. And as a result of my call, it obviously caused Los Angeles Sheriff's Department to get a helicopter, Air 5 chopper, and go look on the cliffs, by the cliffs in the water. And as a result, they found her because of my telephone call. But like the detective said, they did have plans to go the next morning. But they had been in the water many days, said the Paradise Cove manager. They had been in, the day before, and they didn't find her. So I believe that my information that God gave about focusing on she's over by the cliffs, with that information, they were able to finally find her in the water there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, during my interview with the Paradise Cove cafe manager, our conversation turned to the search for Jennifer, like I had said. They had searched the entire waterfront, ocean for her, but were unsuccessful. And that was the same day that I called the detective with my prophetic word about Jennifer. The cafe manager told me again that she was walking in an opposite direction, inland, away from the water. And like I said, it was an affirmation as to the fact that she most likely used the cliffs to enter the water. So anyway,
okay,
it's sad that she was found exactly where God had shown me.
All right. Yeah, that was quite interesting, being a diver and having worked on those cases, the smiley face cases that we were on the Oxygen Channel for in the 6-part series. I would be really, really tempted to take tennis balls or something and go out and throw them off the pier, because that's where everything was found, and see if any of them ended up over in the rocks 225 feet off the cliff. I would venture to say that she had to have gone up there to begin with, and that's part of what was throwing everybody off, and why they were looking in all the wrong places until they got that tip from you, from God, that they needed to go look over there. So now,
I just want to say one thing. I have in writing, people have a dispute out there about how she was murdered, she was this and that. I know for certain that she committed suicide. I have notification from the Board of Supervisors from about Jennifer Michelle Lorber, and it's in writing from them that the medical examiner found that she committed suicide. There was no murder. So that, unfortunately, was an affirmation as well of what God told me.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like we're wrapping up this story about Jennifer, but I know we're not. And this last part of the story, I know that, and I was present for this, and I know that this is a very emotional part of the story, and I think it's going to let listeners know a little bit about you and what attracted made you so attractive to me and why I love you so much. And we're going to talk about what you did for Jennifer as a way to honor her and to personally have closure regarding her case. And that's what I'll ask you to tell us about next. So, what did you do?
Well, just like I have in my head the Tennessee bombing here and there. I mean, I really want to curl up in a ball and scream and cover my head of what's to come with this bomb. It's traumatizing. It's as if I'm standing there really witnessing it, okay? But also my heart goes out to Jennifer. I wasn't there when they recovered her. I didn't ever have closure on my end. I had never, I'd gone, a year later to investigate it to see where exactly they found her. As the cafe manager said, by the cliffs in the water. I didn't have closure. And I needed that on a personal level to let Jennifer go, this memory of the case. And so I wanted to go to the pier where she left her purse and her pills, and by the cliffs at Paradise Cove. And I wanted to put down sunflowers. I felt that she was a very sweet girl, and I did some research online later on, and she also was a believer in Jesus, and she did missionary work, and she had a loving heart and helped a lot of people. Very giving person. And so I felt that sunflowers would be appropriate to put down off the pier at Paradise Cove for her in honor of her, but also as a way of letting her go. And so we went a couple of months ago in 2022. Here it is, 3 years later, having to let go of Jennifer and her case. I mean, I still cry now. I'm crying now. This is why I do what I do, because I care. So I bought sunflowers, and Dr. G and I went together to the pier at Paradise Cove, and I threw down flowers in honor of her and into the ocean, one at a time while praying, and also letting her go out of my heart and just knowing she's with Jesus. And I videoed that if anybody wants to see it. If you're her friend or family, or just want it, or you're a stranger to her, as I am. I didn't know Jennifer. And so you can go to my Facebook, and in the comments to her video, you can find the video where I'm laying down the sunflowers, and I have the cliff behind, in the shot, so that you can see the cliffs if anybody had never really made it to that location. Maybe people are in Colorado and never made it there, right? Who do want to see. You can see that on my pinned docuseries, found on my Facebook, and found as Kymmi, Kymmi, Bloomberg, BLOOMBERG.
You should also.
So I did that for family and friends who cannot make it as well.
You also posted it on some website, wasn't it?
The Dignity.
Dignity, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember that day.
It's Jennifer's memorial on Dignity.
It's not the massive sunflowers like we see up in North Dakota and everything. It was like, 6-inch sunflowers and 2.5-foot stems. And I remember we prayed before starting, and you would raise each one up towards the cliff and say a few words for her and drop the flower. We'd wait until it was in the water and moving, and then proceed to the next one, and video recorded it. And then we had
I feel it's important for me to let it go,
Quiet time.
Have my closure, and that was my closure for my healing as a person. to let her go. And honestly, I will always help victims with my Christian ministry prophetic gifts for justice sakes and proper burials. It's really important to me.
And it was quite interesting, I thought, that we were throwing them off the right side of the pier, and they were separate. They were, a good 10 yards apart as they were drifting underneath the pier, and they went to the left, and as we were leaving, we walked to the other side of the pier, and we watched as they slowly came back together into a small little cluster about, I don't think it was even 5 yards across, maybe 10 feet across.
Yeah.
And they all came back together, and that's when we left quietly, and it was a good day. It was
good
being little ceremony service for her.
Well, yeah, it was to honor her and to let her go, because I believe Jesus has her.
Yeah.
It was a very, as a minister, I've been with people who die in front of me in hospice. They have a do not resuscitate code on them and sign documents, or I wouldn't sit there with them watching them die. I'd go run and get the nurse or the doctor, but I'm the one and only one in the room when they're dying, usually, if they're a DNR, do not resuscitate. And I just want to say that, I've seen a lot in this hospital ministry, and I just want to say that I'm surely am not the person who shames individuals who commit suicide, nor individuals who have attempted it, because I help those people who have attempted it in hospitals. But it is never the answer to our problems. We need help, if we're in that situation. We need God. God is the answer. People just need to realize that they do not want to end their life, but rather end their circumstances. Whatever is going wrong in a person's life, they just need that epiphany moment. I don't want to end my life. I just want my circumstances to change.
Yeah.
That's what needs to be done. And they need to turn to God and ask Him for help. They need to confess they are wanting to end their life to God and ask Him for forgiveness and ask Him to help them. They need to call the suicide hotline or go to the nearest ER or reach out to any medical professional of their choice.
Okay, on that note, I went online in search of a phone number that we could share with listeners about the suicide hotline, and I learned something new. I knew about 911, for emergencies.
Oh, you guys, if you don't know, I graduated from 2 police academies, community academies, with the police department, two of them. And I want you to know, you guys probably don't know, you can text 911. If you cannot talk, you don't want to let someone hear you, know that you can text 911 and talk to them that way for help.
Yep, that's important. And this number here, 988, I just learned about it.
I didn't know about it.
988 is a national suicide and crisis lifeline.
You mean you just dial 988 like you do 911?
988, correct.
I didn't know that.
And you can call them, you can text, you can even chat. Okay? And it comes from, the National Institutes of Health and all that. This is a federal initiative. And now I'm going to read exactly from their website so I don't mess it up. It says, the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, formerly known as the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline, offers 24/7 call, text, and chat access to trained crisis counselors who can help people experiencing suicidal, substance use, and or mental health crisis. or any other kind of emotional distress. So this doesn't, it's not just suicide. If you've got a substance abuse problem, I mean, we got a terrible epidemic out there with opioids. Use this number if you have to, 988. And then it finishes, people can also dial 988 if they are worried about a loved one who may need crisis support. So, please reach out, 988. If you need help, call that number, please. Okay. In closing, what a testimony. The amazing truths that God can reveal through obedient servants via the Holy Spirit gift of prophecy, the ministry gift of prophecy. What else would you like to share with us right now about your ministry in this gift of prophecy? Anything else?
Well, if people are wondering, it's not like psychics or mediums or anything like that, which is a gift that needs to be developed. This is by way of the Holy Spirit that I received this gift upon receiving believing in Jesus back in 1998. It's not something I sought out. It was just given to me. And it took me time to understand, why in the world am I seeing these things? I remember one of the first, and you guys can go ahead and laugh at me, because I really honestly didn't understand. I wasn't a person who was raised in the church. I was a Jew. Last place I would ever go to. Never even ever did it come to my mind when I was on my quest for God and how do you get rid of sin. Never did it once enter my mind to go to a Christian church and, or get the Holy Bible or anything to do with Jesus. I didn't know what Jesus did for me. People can read about that in my Quest for God book that's coming out soon. And within that book, I talk about Kristen Smart. And the book is by publishers HarperCollins, Zandervan. And so you guys are going to find that on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, as well as my website when my publisher puts that up. And I'm also supposed to be on Tyler Henry, Netflix's Tyler Henry, Life After Death on second season. So I'm going to be working a missing person case with Tyler. So I hope that you guys see us on Netflix as long as he gets a second season.
Yep.
We don't know yet for sure, but I've been approved, and as long as the showrunner wants to go with me and use me, I'm approved.
Yeah, and make sure you check out Kymmi's video recorded interviews at her Facebook page. It's a 11-part docu-series, and episode 1.
Yeah, they can find all the evidence, guys, on there to all these cases on my podcast.
Kristen Smart is number 5, and episode 2, the Casey White and Vicky White case, is episode 11 on there.
Oh, on the docu-series pinned to my Facebook.
And you also find Michelle Lorber, as well as the Tennessee bombing on there. And boy, I tell you what, if you got a chance, query that Nashville bombing Christmas Day and look at some of the photographs online, and you'll get an idea of what God had revealed to Kymmi.
And for those who are fans of Dr. G, he is Douglas Lee Gilbertson, PhD. He's a professor, but among other things, you can catch him now on Prime Video. The series was initially on Oxygen Channel, and it's called Smiley Face Killers, The Hunt for Justice. And you can find him on there with his buddies, detectives, New York detectives, and it's real-world cases.
Yep.
And for those who like true crime, that's a series for you.
Yeah, extremely science-heavy. Okay, we're going to wrap it up there. So if you have any feedback for us or ideas for future podcasts that you'd like us to discuss, give us some feedback at Kymmi's Facebook Messenger, and we'll look for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll talk to you on the next episode.